sight of Stark banners on Moatcalin had brought joy to the small group of Northmen and Riverlords. And news that the Boltons and Freys in the north had been slaughtered had made the Great Jon's laugh boom across the great castle and probably all of the neck. Knowledge that Rickon lived had added to that. Starks are fucking hard to kill. The Great Jon had proclaimed that night, as happy as he was when he'd seen the sight of dead Freys. It was a good sign for the group. They would have sanctuary in the north. For the rivermen, they would most likely be staying at Moatcalin, both so Arya's new cousin Hoster would not have to make the long trip north. And should the Riverlands return to Tully hands, they would be much nearer to return to Riverrun. But for Arya, Great Jon Umber and Haryon Karstark, they would be making for Winterfell soon. The three longed to travel, albeit for different reasons. The Great Jon was eager to make his way for Winterfell and meet his family and the new king in the north. Arya had asked how he knew that his family would be with Jon. The Great Jon had just grinned. If my uncles and son haven't been fighting with the king in the north, I'll be smashing their heads together. They'll have known that. For Haryon, it was to see his sister and to help prevent the name Karstark from being further besmirched. Galbert Glover had informed him of what they had done to Stannis in Winterfell. Haryon had been quick to figure out why they had done that. To kill me for Carhold. What grudges Haryon had for Robb killing his father would have to be put aside to help fix his houses standing in the north. It was simple for Arya though. I long for Pack, I long for home. I long for Jon. But the group would have to wait until they could all regain their strength. The wait was excruciating though, with Arya resorting to training and hunting with Nymeria to keep herself busy. She at least knew that Jon would know that she was coming. Galbert Glover had sent a missive by Raven, detailing of the hostages' release and the end of House Fry. Arya had gotten him to write something specific, so he knew it was her. A thank you for my needle. Arya smiled at the thought as she sat on a bench with the rescued hostages and some of the soldiers from the garrison. Arya watched with an amused look as she watched the group from the twins gorge themselves. They'd apparently not been fed well. Something which was obvious on all but the Great Jon, who looked no different to how she'd seen him at a feast in Winterfell. Half-starved, and he is still a giant. Winter's finally here. Haryon Karstark said solemnly as he looked out towards the light snow. It would only get heavier the further north they went. I doubt this will be a short one either. A 10-year summer we've just had. One of the northern soldiers added. Great Jon nodded. I means we won't have to deal with any southerners for a while. The Undals will freeze their bollocks off just getting to the moat. Do you think the king in the north will march south like King Robb? Mark Piper asked the group. Haryon shook his head. Not according to Galbert. He'd been ordered to guard the moat, only to have a small force ready for taking only the twins. And now that the Freys are dead, the king won't be marching south. Olivar stated. Arya could hear the discomfort in his voice, knowing his family had been wiped out. It did not give Arya guilt. Father once told me that it was never wise for anyone to go to war in winter. Only Northmen who were willing to die so our families could be fed would wage war. Jon will be thinking of feeding us all through winter instead of looking southward. Arya said quietly. Thinking of father always hurts. Great Jon downed his drink in one before slamming it. Don't worry, Piper. Us Northmen will not be forgetting the Lannister cunts. They don't understand what winter does. They'll be starving by the time spring comes and will be eager to get warm killing the fucks. The group all chuckled at the Umber. Arya turned to the door as she heard a guard enter. Leaving the door open behind him, she could hear that there was a commotion outside. Princess Arya, there's an army approaching the moat. Arya kept the distaste at being called princess hidden. Are the Lannisters stupid enough to battle against the moat? Haryon asked. Great Jon laughed. If they are, it means I can crush their skulls earlier. The guard shook his head. They're not Lannister colors. They're Vale and Riverland banners. Aaron and Tully. Then it's best you show us, Arya said calmly. Asterisk. The Vale and Tully banners had offered a white flag to parley with them. The Northmen were all on edge despite the banners waving. Nobody wanted to deal with another betrayal or trap by the Lannisters. Arya had no intention of that as she rode with Glover, Umber and her wolf pack. Arya doubted anyone would try anything with a free direwolf, her massive pack behind her. It seemed to assure the soldiers with her. As they rode, she could see a small group of people at the front, mostly Vale men by the banners and crescents on their armor. Glover was glaring hard at the Vale banners. These men were supposedly friends of your father once. He said they were honorable. Great Jon spat onto the ground as they rode nearer. If they were friends of Ned Stark, they would have fought with us the moment he'd been taken by the Lannisters. They're craven cunts. The Vale has no friends here anymore, Arya thought darkly. As they got towards the group of Vale banners, Arya could also see someone she hadn't expected. Peter Baelish. Nymeria gave a low growl. I remember you from the capital and Harrenhal. You stood there when father was beheaded. You served the Lannisters. What are you doing here? Baelish seemed to show surprise and then smiled. Arya didn't like that smile. Is that the Lady Arya Stark? He asked in such a friendly manner. Arya felt Nymeria's pack grow tense. Lord Baelish, Arya said coldly. Her wolves were growling. Baelish kept smiling. Arya could see the falsity in it. The faceless men told me how to see lies. You're not happy to see me at all. I'm so glad you remember me, Lady Arya. I feared that you had died, or that you had been given to the Boltons. Your father would be glad to know that another of his children lived. Did he tell you that when you watched his head get cut off beside Joffrey? Arya asked icily. Nymeria was eyeing up Baelish. Great Jon and Glover had their hands on their swords. Arya could hear that the Great Jon unsheathed half of his great sword. Baelish eyed them all more warily. I'm sorry to hear that you had witnessed your father's execution. Much like your sister, I was a hostage there. To have not obeyed the king would have meant the same fate. Lie. The pack of wolves were snarling. The Vale Knights with him were looking nervous. What brings a Lannister cunt and a bunch of cravens to the north then? Great Jon Umber boomed, anger amplifying his voice. The Vale Knights didn't like the comment. Baelish kept his composure. I'm not a Lannister sympathizer. I've come to aid the North. Much like the Knights of the Vale. We wish to restore the Lady Sansa to her rightful seat and to bring the North into the fight against the Lannister again. Until now we were only aware that she was the only true-born child of Ned Stark left. She'll be delighted to know her sister lives. The lords and soldiers bristled at the words. He wants to hurt Jon. He lies and he threatens my brother. I will kill you. You don't have the Lady Sansa Stark. She hasn't been heard from since you Lannisters married her off to the dwarf, Glover said with venom. Baelish began to smile, turning to one of the Vale Knights. Go fetch Lady Sansa Stark and her husband Lord Aaron. I'm sure she'll be delighted to see her sister. The Vale Knight seemed eager to leave the parley, riding back to the main force of Vale and Tully banners. The group waited silently for the knight to return with her sister. The Northmen were given deathly stares to the Vale banners and Baelish. Arya was thinking as her wolves snarled for her. Arya knew that he did not know about Rickon being with Jon by the way he spoke. But the Lord clearly knew that Jon was at Winterfell. Her thoughts drifted to Sansa. Does he truly have my sister? And is she willing to hurt Jon? The thought of Sansa harming Jon made her angry. I won't let you if you try. They waited for a few more minutes before she could see horses approaching, carrying Tully, Aaron and Stark banners. As Arya looked at the group, she could see that of Baelish's lies there was one truth. He has my sister. Sansa lives. Arya could recognize the auburn hair, the slender figure and the tully blue eyes. It was clearly her, only a woman grown. Much like herself. Arya kept herself composed as the group stopped in front of them. Arya could see the shock on her sister's face. She knew that face, the one that assumed Arya Stark had died. I live just like you. Beside her stood a man in Arryn colors with sandy hair and blue eyes. He's not my cousin. I heard he was sickly and had dark hair. Is he dead too? Baelish looked smug. May I present the Lady Sansa Stark and her husband Lord Harold Arryn, the rightful Lady of Winterfell and the Lord of the Vale. Arya and the Northmen turned to her sister. Have you betrayed us? Sansa looked back and smiled. It was a genuine one. I thought you had died after they killed father. Arya could see her hold back tears. She could also hear the regret. Arya smiled at her sister. Starks are hard to kill, Sansa. I haven't seen you since father died. Baelish grinned. A fake one. He doesn't like my presence. You see, I speak the truth, Lady Arya. I simply seek to restore your sister to her rightful seat. We want to enter the north, then the banners can be called to Winterfell for the march south. The great Jon looked like he had enough. I won't have any of you Vale shits in the north, threatening the king in the north. He'd unsheathed the great sword fully. The Vale knights had stepped back. Glover had moved his horse so he could put a hand on the man to calm him. It didn't work. Arya gave the lord a look instead. He held for a moment. We've been ordered by the king in the north to not let any armies north of the neck, Glover said. And those are the words of a bastard and an oath-breaker. Not your trueborn lady. Lord Arryn said arrogantly. I'll kill you too. Arya looked at her sister. What do you want, Sansa? Sansa's face had turned from a smile to a stern face. I seek to take my rightful place as the Lady of Winterfell, Arya. I seek to take my place where the bastard of Winterfell sits. Arya might have believed those words if she was still a child. Sansa had never been close to Jon, not like her. But this, Arya knew better. I know when people are lying. My sister is doing that now. She doesn't want this. Arya turned to Baelish. You will not have passage into the north. We know no king, but the king in the north whose name is Stark. I won't have anyone threaten my brother. At that she turned her horse, wolves following with the lords. We need to send word to the king, Glover stated. The great Jon grinned. Aye, he can come down and join us in smashing that Lannister cunt's face. And we can get Princess Sansa back, Arya affirmed. The two nodded with smiles as they rode. Nymeria and the pack were howling loudly. I won't let them hurt you, Jon. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives.